The galactic station was never quiet. 100 alien tongues hummed like a living orchestra, growls, clicks, and whispers bouncing off steel walls. Yet on this night, all of it fell beneath a single sound. A cry, sharp, piercing, the wail of a dragonling. A cry. At the center of the dining hall sat Emperor Zephys Malthak, ruler of a star-spanning empire, scales obsidian, eyes like molten suns. He could command fleets, silence rebellions, bend galaxies to his will. But tonight, he couldn't quiet his own child. Pion, his heir, cried, and the mighty emperor's claws trembled under the stares of 100 watching species. And then, through the crowd, stepped a human waitress. Small, fragile by galactic standards. But when she opened her mouth and began to sing, something impossible happened. Not just the child, but even the emperor himself began to listen. What power lay in a human lullaby that could shake the heart of a dragon emperor? If that opening already has you leaning in, just wait until you hear how one song could change the fate of humanity itself. Make sure to hit like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss the next HFY story we bring to life. And hey, if you know someone who loves a good sci-fi twist, share this with them. Let's dive in. The Galactic Station's dining hall was alive with noise. Conversations overlapped in dozens of alien languages. Plates clattered, steam hissed from strange machines, and translators hummed to keep the chaos legible. It was the kind of soundscape you got used to, until one sound shattered it all. Not the ordinary fuss of a child, but the shrill, trembling wail of a dragonling. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. Even hardened traders who'd seen battles and storms paused mid-bite. At the heart of it all sat Emperor Zephys Malthak. To most, he was an untouchable force. Obsidian scales, massive wings folded like iron walls, eyes that could freeze a council in silence. But tonight, those eyes flickered with something different. Uncertainty. His son, Pion, just 3 cycles old, twisted in distress. Tiny wings fluttered helplessly, and the harder Zephys rumbled soft words in the ancient tongue, the louder the cries grew. It was a sound that pierced deeper than plasma fire. For the emperor of a star-spanning hegemony, weakness was unthinkable. Yet here, before hundreds of watching eyes, Zephys could not command peace from his own child, and the shame of it darkened his scales for all to see. Zephys Malthak had ruled for over 3 millennia. He had outlasted rebellions, forced entire systems into obedience, and crushed rivals with nothing but his will. But in that moment, none of it mattered. His empire could tremble before him, yet his son's cries stripped him bare. The dragonling's wail bounced off the reinforced walls, rattling more than utensils. Patrons shifted uncomfortably, some covering sensitive auditory organs, others daring quick glances at the emperor's massive frame. To show embarrassment was dangerous for any draconian. For their emperor, it was humiliation carved into living stone. Zephys leaned close, his voice low, almost pleading. "Hush, little one," he whispered in the ancient tongue, the words carrying weight like thunder rolling across mountains. "You shame our bloodline with such displays." But Pion only cried harder. His tiny claws flexed against the table, wings twitching in agitation. A hush settled across the hall, not out of respect, but tension. Every species present could sense it. This was not just a father's struggle. This was a test of power. And for the first time in centuries, Emperor Zephys found himself on the losing side. From the far side of the dining hall, a pair of human eyes watched the scene unfold. Mahin Rashid balanced a tray of alien delicacies, her dark hair tied back, her expression calm but thoughtful. To most of the galaxy, humans were still barely more than newcomers, clever primates clinging to borrowed technology. But Mahin had something far rarer than status: experience. She had grown up as the eldest of 7 on Earth Colony Prime. She knew the cries of tired children, the frantic pitch of overstimulation, the little gasps that meant a small body was overwhelmed by too much sound, too much light. And that, she realized, was what Pion was facing now. Her co-worker Adam leaned close, whispering, Poor guy. Even emperors can't figure out crying kids. But Maheen only nodded, her eyes softening. The little one's not misbehaving, she murmured. He's drowning in it all. The lights, the smells, the noise. Dragonlings are hypersensitive at that age. Adam blinked. How do you even know that? She gave a faint smile. I read xenopediatrics texts in my spare time. Dream of opening an interspecies daycare one day. Her gaze drifted back to the Emperor's table. And slowly, a decision began to form. The Dragonling's cries climbed to a sharper pitch, causing several diners to flinch and cover their ears. Emperor Zephyr's scales darkened further, a visible flush of mortification that spread across his armored body. Every passing second felt like a blade twisting into his pride. And that was when Maheen set her tray down. Adam's eyes went wide. Wait, Maheen, what are you doing? He hissed, grabbing at her sleeve, but she was already moving. Step by careful step, she crossed the dining hall, her posture calm, her movement slow and deliberate. The effect was immediate. Zephyr's head snapped up, his golden gaze blazing. Conversations died instantly. Everyone in the hall knew what it meant. Approaching the offspring of a dragon emperor without permission was nothing short of a death sentence. Maheen bowed low, her hands at her sides in a gesture she had studied from the station's cultural archives. Her voice was steady, though her heart pounded. Your Imperial Majesty, she said softly. Forgive my intrusion, but I could not ignore the young prince's distress. The Emperor's tail lashed once, sharp as a whip crack. His voice rumbled, cold and dangerous. You dare approach draconian royalty, human? Every gaze in the dining hall locked on Maheen. A human, one of the least regarded species in the galaxy, stood facing the Emperor of the draconian hegemony. The weight of the moment pressed down like gravity itself. Zephyr's golden eyes narrowed, gleaming like molten metal. Humans are barely recognized as sentient, he growled, his voice reverberating through the walls. Clever animals at best, and yet you claim you can aid my heir when I cannot? Maheen kept her head bowed but her tone steady. Only to help, Your Majesty. I've cared for many little ones before. I believe I can ease his distress. A dangerous silence followed. Then Zephyrus leaned forward, his scales glinting. You think you can succeed where I, Emperor of 7 star systems, have failed? Maheen met his gaze, calm and unflinching. May I try? The Emperor's nostrils flared, smoke curling faintly. For a long, tense moment, he said nothing. Then, finally, he gave a single curt nod. 1 minute, he rumbled. If you fail, it will be your last. A ripple of shock swept the hall. Maheen inhaled slowly, steadying her heart. This was no longer about service. It was survival. Maheen moved slowly, careful not to make any sudden gestures. She didn't reach for the child, didn't try to touch him at all. Instead, she lowered herself into the empty chair across from Payan. The little dragonling hiccuped between cries, his tiny chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. And then, Maheen began to sing. Her voice was soft, unhurried, carrying a rhythm as natural as breathing. No translator could interpret the tune. It wasn't meant for words. It was a lullaby, ancient and human, passed from grandmother to mother to child. A song about safety, about love that didn't falter, about the warmth of arms that promised, you are not alone. The effect was immediate. Payan's cries faltered, his golden eyes blinking wide as the melody wrapped around him like a blanket unseen. His little wings trembled once, then stilled. The sharp wail dissolved into soft, uncertain whimpers. Around the hall, conversation stopped. Every species turned, their expressions shifting from curiosity to wonder. Even Emperor Zephyrus leaned forward, drawn by something in the sound, something that bypassed reason and clawed straight into the spirit. The great hall held its breath as a human lullaby filled the air. The song rippled outward, threading through the chaos of the dining hall like light through water. One by one, the conversation stilled completely. A trader froze mid-bite, A pair of insectoid clerks lowered their antennae in quiet awe. Even the translation devices seemed muted, their hum fading beneath the pure sound of a human lullaby. Payan blinked, his breathing slowing, his claws unclenching from the edge of the table. A small chirp slipped from his throat, fragile, questioning, but no longer desperate. It was the first sound of calm the hall had heard all evening. Emperor Zephys felt his chest tighten in a way no battle had ever managed. His son, heir to the draconian throne, had gone from inconsolable wails to stillness, all because of this small, fragile creature before him. This human. Around them, silence lingered, but it wasn't empty. It was reverent, as if every being present understood they were witnessing something beyond politics or species, something primal. Mahin's song wound to a gentle close, the last note hanging in the air like a star refusing to fade. For several heartbeats, no one dared to move. And then Payan let out a soft, unmistakable giggle. The giggle rang out like a spark in the dark, and the entire hall seemed to exhale at once. 100 species warriors and merchants alike stared at the Dragonling as if they had just seen a miracle. But no one's gaze was as sharp or as shaken as Emperor Zephys's. His massive claws flexed against the table, his tail stilled. For 3,000 years, he had commanded fleets, broken empires, endured battles that scarred the stars themselves, and never once had he felt powerless. Until tonight. He leaned forward, his golden eyes fixed on Mahin. There was no fury now, no threat, only something rawer, almost fragile. How? His voice rumbled low, not like thunder this time, but like a question whispered across a canyon. How did you quiet what even I could not? Mahin smiled gently, extending her hand for Payan to sniff. Every young one, no matter the species, needs to feel safe, needs to know they are loved. Sometimes words are not enough. Sometimes it takes something deeper. Zephys studied her, the hall waiting on his breath. Finally, he murmured almost to himself, "A song." Payan tilted his head, his molten gold eyes fixed on Mahin. The Dragonling leaned closer, sniffing her hand with a forked tongue before nudging his tiny horns against her fingers. A soft rumble of contentment vibrated through him, so gentle it barely seemed real. Mahin stroked his scales with care, her voice warm but calm. "Young ones," she said softly, "see the heart before they see the species." The words lingered in the air, simple yet heavy with meaning. A murmur rippled through the crowd, aliens who had always dismissed humans as fragile, primitive, insignificant. And yet here was proof of something undeniable, a connection no technology, no power, no empire could forge. Zephys sat utterly still, his wings pressing tight against his back. His people had long taught that to show emotion was weakness, that vulnerability invited death. Yet here his heir nestled trustingly into the lap of a human waitress. "Strange," Zephys muttered, though his voice carried across the hall. "He should fear you. He should recoil." Mahin smiled faintly. "Maybe, but children don't measure worth the way adults do. They listen to what's inside us. And sometimes, they recognize love before we do ourselves." The Emperor's gaze lingered on his son, curled so trustingly against the human. Payan's chest rose and fell in steady rhythm now, each breath proof of a peace Zephys himself had failed to provide. Something inside the Emperor shifted, subtle, yet seismic. For centuries, the draconian creed had been simple. Strength, above all. Weakness was an open wound, an invitation to be crushed. Yet here, before the eyes of 100 species, weakness had transformed into calm, not through fire, not through force, but through something as fragile as a song. Zephys's massive claws tapped against the table as though weighing an invisible scale. He had dismissed humans as clever mammals, unremarkable beside the great civilizations of the stars. But this was no accident. This was a power different from conquest or command, a power he had never considered. His golden eyes softened, if only slightly. He spoke low, as though testing the shape of the thought aloud. "Perhaps there is strength I do not yet understand. Around the hall, the silence deepened. No one had ever heard Emperor Zephys admit such a thing, and yet none could deny the truth before them. Zephys remained motionless for a long moment, the weight of a galaxy pressing down on his next words. His son slept peacefully now, tiny scales gleaming like liquid silver under the station lights. Maheen's hand rested gently against the Dragonling's back, steady and sure. Finally, the Emperor spoke. His voice was deep but no longer sharp. It carried something rarer, almost reverent. You said you studied the care of alien young. Maheen hesitated, then nodded. It's only a hobby. I read xenopediatrics in my spare time. Someday I'd like to work with interspecies families. Zephys's golden eyes burned with an intensity that made the hall feel smaller. The hegemony spans 7 star systems. Countless young ones struggle as we expand into new worlds. If your talent can reach beyond my son, then perhaps it can serve them as well. He paused, then inclined his head, a gesture no one could remember him giving to an outsider. Human. Would you consider serving as royal advisor for the care of the young? Gasps rippled through the crowd. A waitress, barely acknowledged by galactic society, was being offered a place in the Emperor's court. Adam nearly dropped a stack of glasses. The hall erupted in whispers like a sudden storm breaking across still water. Insectoid traders clicked in disbelief. Avian diplomats fluffed their feathers in agitation, and reptilian guards exchanged uneasy glances. A human, one of the least regarded species, invited into the very heart of the draconian court. It was unthinkable. Adam's jaw dropped, his voice barely a whisper. Did he just offer her a seat beside the throne? He wasn't alone. All across the dining hall, jaws, beaks, mandibles, and snouts hung open. Maheen, for her part, did not answer right away. Her gaze rested on the sleeping Dragonling, her hand moving gently along his scaled back. The weight of the moment pressed on her, but she did not falter. If I were to accept, Your Majesty, she said slowly, it would have to be on one condition. Respect for both your traditions and the well-being of the young. No child should be forced to suffer for pride. The Emperor's nostrils flared, but instead of anger, his eyes gleamed with something else. Consideration. Respect. Around them, the silence grew taut again. The galaxy was watching. Humanity's place in it was shifting with every heartbeat. The silence was broken only by the steady rhythm of Peon's breathing. His small body curled safely against Maheen's lap. The sight alone was enough to unravel centuries of prejudice. A dragon heir, future emperor of 7 systems, trusting a human as though she were kin. Zephys spoke slowly, his tone measured as though each word carried the weight of law. Then it shall be as you ask. Protocols will be written, tradition will be honored, but the well-being of the young will not be neglected. A ripple went through the crowd. Some species exchanged glances of disbelief, others of awe. For the first time, humans were not being spoken about as an afterthought, but as contributors to galactic culture. Maheen inclined her head, her voice calm. Then perhaps this will not just be for draconian young, but for all young who struggle to adapt. The Emperor studied her with an intensity that made the air feel heavy. And then, for the first time in living memory, he gave something closer to a smile. A faint curl of scaled lips, but unmistakable. A bridge had been built that night. Not through treaties or weapons, but through a songword of the event spread faster than plasma through vacuum. Within days, whispers reached other stations, other worlds. The story was always the same. A human waitress had calmed the air of the draconian throne with nothing more than a song. At first, many dismissed it as exaggeration. But when witnesses, traders, diplomats, mercenaries began to confirm the account, the galaxy listened. Suddenly, humanity was no longer just the clever primates who stumbled into the stars. They were something else, something valuable. Requests began pouring in. Colonies wanted human caretakers. Embassies sought human advisors. Species that once sneered at Earthborn crews now asked for lullabies, for comfort, for the strange, inexplicable empathy that seemed woven into human hearts. On Omega 7 Station, Mahin's quiet act had set off a storm. For the first time, the galaxy began to see humanity not through the lens of weakness but of possibility. And in the midst of it all, Emperor Zephyr's decision echoed louder than any decree of conquest. He had chosen a human to stand beside him, not as servant, but as advisor. The age of recognition had begun. That night, long after the hall had emptied and the whispers of scandal and wonder had faded into corridors, Emperor Zephys sat alone in his chambers. His son slept beside him, curled against a nest of silken cloth, breathing soft and steady. The emperor should have been furious at his own helplessness, humiliated by the weakness he had shown before 100 watching eyes. Yet when he closed his eyes, what echoed in his mind was not shame, it was the song. Soft, human, fragile, yet more powerful than all the weapons of his empire. He found himself humming it under his breath, awkward at first, then steady, and to his astonishment it soothed him too. For the first time in 3,000 years, Zephys understood. Strength was not always fire and steel. Sometimes it was tenderness. Sometimes it was trust, and sometimes it was a lullaby. Humanity had entered his empire not as conquerors but as caretakers, and he knew now that their place among the stars had only just begun. And that's where our story leaves us. An emperor, a dragonling, and a single human voice that changed the fate of a species. If this story stirred something in you, if you felt that shiver when the hall fell silent, stick with us. Here on Paragon's Read-By-Tales, we dive into the very best HFY moments, where humanity's heart outshines even the fiercest empires. So, what do you think? Is compassion humanity's greatest weapon in the stars? Let me know in the comments. And remember, every like, every share, every subscription helps us keep these tales alive for you. Until next time, keep listening for the songs that can move empires.